So the multiverse is dying. Yep, things aren't looking good, and everything's fated to end in a multitude of incursions and multiversal wars that ultimately destroy timelines across the Marvel Universe. After first being opened up during the events of Loki Season 1, we've slowly seen projects embracing it from across the pantheon of Marvel movies and shows. So far it's been explored in What If, Venom Let There Be Carnage, No Way Home, Morbius, Multiverse of Madness, and across the Spiderverse. I've recently been rereading Jonathan Hickman's Avengers run, and this seminal arc pulls together a wealth of things that all culminate in Secret Wars. That 2015 book has a lot going on with it, and with that being where we're eventually headed, I think we have to get used to what it means. Now, in order to explain this, we have to look at what we're told in Across the Spiderverse. This spans a Marvel Multiverse, with Miles Morales meeting several different Spider people. In it, we discover that Miguel O'Hara was desperate for a family, and that he travelled to a universe where a version of him had had one and had died. This ended up destroying said universe, and since then he's done wherever he can within his power to stop non-canon events from destroying others. This is why he doesn't want Gwen meeting Miles, why Jefferson has to die, and why people that don't hit subscribe could risk losing it all. Now this is a similar thing to what Doctor Strange touched upon during Multiverse of Madness. Though he met a Christine variant, he couldn't be with her because of incursions causing the universes to start to come together. Now that takes us into the first big part of the video, which is explaining how that all works, what happened within in the comics, and also how the heroes managed to find a way to stop incursions from destroying the 616. As we mentioned, all of this started during Jonathan Hickman's seminal Avengers run, which also carried over into his new Avengers stuff. In one book, you had the public-facing stuff that the Avengers were doing, and this involved things like investigating why there were a group of godlike creatures, called the Gardeners, that had entered the universe. On the other side of this, you had the secret society of the Illuminati in the new Avengers, which only a select few were actually aware of. They were working a way to keep things quiet, investigating incursions, and destroying any Earth that could come into contact with the 616. This ran from Avengers World through to the Infinity storyline before going into Time Runs Out and then finally Secret Wars. Ultimately, it ended up streamlining all the universes, so we had Miles Morales coming into the main one, along with all the other big characters that were in offshoot books on different worlds. We will of course have you covered throughout this video, but I definitely recommend picking up Hickman's run if you love this movie as much as I did. Now I think the best thing to talk about next is what an incursion actually is in the comics, as it's slightly different to how they operate in the MCU. However, they do have some similarities, and just like you saw in Multiverse of Madness, two Earths start to merge into one. They take 8 hours to collide with each other, and both the Earth and their respective universes are destroyed in this collision. During 2013's New Avengers issue 1, Black Panther saw the start of this and encountered Black Swan, who was from a colliding Earth. They ended up imprisoning her, and she became a big part in this and the Superior Iron Man story. Now it's important to bear in mind that incursions can only be witnessed if you step behind an invisible barrier that shows you the incoming collision. It sort of acts like a doorway, and to everyone on the other side of this, they can't see what's going on, whereas once you pass through, you can perceive the incoming Earth. Now the only way to seemingly stop this incoming Earth is to destroy it, and it's very much a survival of the fittest mentality that saves their world but completely dooms another. We'll talk about how the Illuminati operated during this, but with Black Panther being a member and the whole invisible wall thing, the incursions didn't get out for quite some time. Either way, the Illuminati were working away secretly to get to the root cause of them, whilst also destroying worlds to save the 616. Once this all got out in Original Sin, it caused a hell of a lot of issues because the Illuminati were murdering billions en masse every time they destroyed a world. However, they were doing it to save their own, so you could kind of see things from their perspective, though it's a very morally grey area. Now, the root cause of the incursions was due to one of the Earths in the multiverse exploding 25 years before it was supposed to. This caused what's known as a contraction in the multiversal timeline that rippled out and knocked the other Earths out of whack, which caused a domino effect. It's also important to bear in mind that the universe has beings in them known as builders, who created everything at the dawn of time. They built worlds and sent in beings known as gardeners that would evolve life on the planet and then continue from there. Now, if life worked, then they would move on to another world, but if the life was bad, then they'd go and destroy it. The opening of Avengers World centered around this, with a team going against a gardener called Ex Nihilo. Now, this provided a good distraction for some of the characters, and it allowed the Illuminati to deal with the incursions whilst everyone looked the other way. Now, the incursing Earths usually appeared red, but beings known as the Mapmakers turned some blue, and this was so they could track them. This also allowed them to identify those who were interfering with the will of the universe and get at the true reason behind all the incursions. Now it turns out that the person who set them off was actually Doctor Doom, and this was because he was trying to stop the plan of the Beyonders. Yes, Doom was actually trying to save the entire multiverse, but instead he ended up destroying it.
He's made you look a right knob.
Now the Beyonders exist in a space beyond the multiverse, and in Doom going against them, it set off this chain of events. Just like all omnipotent beings in the media, the Beyonders saw humans as their playthings, and while they were meant to be stewards of the multiverse from the outside, they had their own nefarious plans. They wanted to conduct an experiment of destroying the entire multiverse, and this was so that they could see what happens. It's kind of like when you drop a Mentos in a Diet Coke or make a potato clock. You're just kind of messing around, but John Tickle from Brainiac, he would never do this.
Anyway, we're here for the science, aren't we? We're here to find out which floats best. An O pair or a fake pair?
What?
Now their overall plan was to use a bomb in each universe to destroy each of the worlds at the same time. This bomb would be a person, and they placed it in the universal constant Owen Reese, aka the Molecule Man. He first appeared in Fantastic Four 20 way back in 1963 and gained his powers from the Beyonder after an atomic incident. Seemed like it was all just one big kerfuffle, he got himself in a pickle, but in another plot twist we learned his origin was actually planned. This was carried out by the Beyonders, so his origin was constant across the multiverse, and thus they had a way to control and manipulate every reality. Now Doom was told by Molecule Man that in order to save the universe, he'd need to kill every single version of him across the entire multiverse. This would stop the Beyonders' twisted science experiments, and the bomb that Molecule Man wouldn't end up detonating. Now Molecule Man set this off by killing a version of himself 25 years ago, but this created the death of the universe that then caused the contractions. This had a dormant effect until 7 years after that, which is when the incursions started, and the Beyonders then noticed this 3 years after. Infecting the AI that travelled across universes, they then used that as a way to track the deaths of Molecule Man happening across the multiverse. This would then be used to help them find Doctor Doom and his army of swans, which were being used to kill all the Molecule Men. This caused a secret war in which the Beyonders were battling Doom to exact their plans on the multiverse, whilst he was attempting to stop them. Now the big weakness that the Beyonders had was that they couldn't travel back in time, and this was due to them being stuck having to live in linear time. Doom used this to defeat them, and in taking their power, he then created the Battle World. Now that's kind of what happened in the comics, but depending on what goes with Kang, and also Jonathan Majors, we are going to see how they adapt that. I am kind of skipping ahead there and just telling the big overarching story so you get the context, but for the next part of the video, I want to go into what happened with the Illuminati and then how this is echoed in Across the Spiderverse. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves, as all of Doom's plans existed without anyone knowing. Now the Illuminati needed a way to deal with arguably the biggest threat they'd ever faced, and this led them to do acts hitherto undreamt of.
Did you seriously just say hitherto undreamt of?
When we look at what they'd faced before, they can fight a Thanos, they can fight a Galactus, they can do a time heist, they can hit a thumbs up button. However, when it comes to things like this, it's kind of beyond them. Destroying an entire world in order to save their own is something that very few are equipped to deal with, and thus they had to become like Oppenheimer in order to carry it out.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Now, during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, Captain America discovered the Illuminati, and he was furious to learn about Tony's secret dealings. These were people who'd had their hands in almost everything since their formation, and the fact that even the Avengers didn't know about it was a really sore point. Thus, to bury the hatchet, Tony invited him into the group, but pretty early on he realised he wasn't the right person for the job. The Illuminati are extremely cutthroat because they have to make tough choices, and people like Steve aren't exactly the best fit. Now, the Illuminati feel like they're the most equipped to do this because they have someone in them that represents every aspect of Earth. For example, you have Tony representing the humans, Doctor Strange representing magic, Namor for Atlantis, Black Bolt for the Inhumans, Professor X represented the mutants, and Black Panther the Wakandans. Each one of them would meet in secret when a large threat was on the horizon, and they'd then decide how best to handle it. Now Steve, like I said, he isn't exactly a cut and run kind of guy, and whereas the rest wanted to destroy the incursing Earth, he refused to do it. At his core, Steve's biggest flaw is that he refuses to make sacrifices, and he'll do whatever he can to come to a resolution where nobody has to die. This most notably caused them to take the L in Infinity War, but it's very much the character's greatest strength and his greatest weakness. Now why I'm telling you this is because he refused to do anything that would destroy another Earth, and instead he came up with the idea of using a newly built Infinity Gauntlet. This would be so they could push the other Earth away, go to the Winchester, and wait for it all to blow over. However, this didn't work, and it was worse for Steve than when he got to meet his niece Shannon for the first time in that alternate timeline. Ooh, better not tell Peggy about Civil War. Now, trying to stop this shattered all the Infinity Stones, except for the Time Gem, which then travelled into the future. It disappeared out of sight, and thus the Avengers were left there looking like mugs. Now, I think in the MCU, we're going to get a similar sort of thing, as the Infinity Stones have now been destroyed, and thus they can't be used on the main Earth to help divert Incursions. Now, obviously, with the plan to push things causing the destruction of the stones, they didn't really want to attempt anything else that could cause even more damage. So the plan was just to destroy the incoming Earth instead, then go to the Winchester, have a pint, and wait for it all to blow over. Captain America wasn't really that pleased though, so what the Illuminati did is that they wiped his memory. Yep, everything he learned about the Illuminati, that's no more, and he can't remember there's a big thing going on right now that he can only stop by destroying another Earth. Hickman played with this brilliantly, and at the start of Avengers World we watch as Steve woke up, which is where he told Tony that he'd had a bad dream. We got a flash of the Illuminati standing around him, but beyond that he couldn't quite grasp what had actually happened. Again, you had these two stories going on, with the Avengers comics just showing that everyone was up to their old ways and fighting the good old fight. However, in the new Avengers, the Illuminati was dealing with the untold cost of stopping all the incursions. If you read just that initial Avengers run, I think you'd think things were pretty cliche, as they just sent Steve off to do simpler things like recruit other Avengers and fight big battles in space. Because he was distracted, the Illuminati were now free to head out and deal with the incursions encumbered by the Boy Scout. Now there's lots of big stories that happen in this, and there's a time where they fight a world that has a play on the Justice League, and both teams initially want to find a peaceful resolution. As time goes on though, and that clock starts to tick down, they just say f it and have a fight. There was also an instance where Namor stormed out because they wanted to try and find a way to avoid destroying the other Earth. The 8 hours counted down, and then they hit 0, -1 second, -2 seconds, -3, and the countdown just kept going past that. Everyone was confused, thinking, we should all be dead now, and they started to question whether they'd gotten a false positive. It made them think their instruments might be wrong, or maybe they'd got the entire incursion things wrong right from the start. What had actually happened though is that Namor had gone off, recruited a bunch of supervillains, and they'd got together and destroyed the entire Earth. Yeah, very messed up, and as we touched on, Steve's memory was fixed in the original Sin Run, which made him remember everything. Exposing the secrets, he then confronted Tony directly, and at this point, he just lost it and beat the crap out of him. Now, there was just one problem with this, and something you need to bear in mind when you fight Tony Stark. Don't whatever you do, fight him in his home. This is what Tony makes clear too, and when you're in his office, you're in his workshop, his war room, the one place you don't want to be if you're his enemy. Launching all his Iron Man suits, he then evened the odds, and it was such a cool moment that just made my jaw hit the floor when I read it. Now eventually things led into Secret Wars, but we can easily see how the Illuminati here are being brought across to the MCU version.
The Illuminati?
In Multiverse of Madness, we finally saw them in the 838, and this happened after we got a tease in Iron Man 2. In that film, you could catch a glimpse of Tony Stark's phone with an Illuminati app on it, so potentially the team was formed then, and even the audience didn't know about it. Either way, the 838's Illuminati explain the incursions in the MCU, and we know that these operate slightly differently. However, where the Illuminati is similar is that they've used lies and deception to keep the public blissfully unaware of the true threats of the multiverse. Now in the main MCU universe, Doctor Strange's world faced off and beat Thanos through using time travel. However, in the 838, Doctor Strange used the Darkhold to dreamwalk, and this was so he could go across the multiverse to find a way to defeat Thanos. In doing so, he created the incursions, and just by existing in another universe, this pulled the realities together. In the MCU, spending too much time in another reality has an almost magnetic effect in which molecules from each side pull together so that they can be whole. As we mentioned, in the comics, the true cause of incursions was Doctor Doom trying to stop the death of the multiverse, which then had a knock-on effect that started to cause its death. However, the multiverse in the MCU does appear to be all over the place, with the TVA, Council of Kangs, and dreamwalking being a factor. Now, we also have a great example in the What If episode centered around Strange saving Christine. Described as a fixed point, this is very similar to a canon event in which that variant's version of Christine had to die. This would then push him on to become Doctor Strange, and thus it had to be a fixed point in reality. Throughout the episode, Strange did whatever he could to save her, but this too ended up destroying the entirety of his universe. Now this seems to be similar to how things operating across the Spiderverse, with Miguel's actions causing a world to be destroyed. In the movie, we discover that he was desperate for a family, and thus he travelled to a reality in which a variant of him had had one and had then died. However, this had massive repercussions, and it led to him ending that entire world. Now, since then, he has tried to stop non-canon events, but in doing this, he just ends up causing them. Gwen saves her father as an affront to his actions, Miles is desperate to save his dad, and it's gonna have this knock-on effect like what we got with Doom. Blood seems to be the only way to end things in the Marvel Universe, and we see on the A38 that the Illuminati had to kill their Strange to avoid any more from happening. We later on meet a sinister Strange who caused one as well, and these will likely be happening across the multiverse, even though we're unaware of them. So yes, the multiverse is dying, and there's probably millions of incursions happening across the cosmos that the heroes aren't able to comprehend. Although you might think all these events are different, they're basically linked through the same modus operandi and can show what can end the multiverse. Sounds so bloody clever saying that. Now, the universes I'm sorry for being so pretentious. Now, the point I'm trying to get across here is that the universes themselves appear to be extremely unstable, and even the slightest change can knock things off and destroy them. For example, you stop a canon event like in the case of Christine, or what we get in Spiderverse, then you're gonna cause that reality to start to fall apart. If you spend too much time in another reality dreamwalking, then you're gonna knock things off too, and everything's gonna start to head towards oblivion. If you kill Molecule Man when you shouldn't, then that's gonna set things off as well, and basically doing anything that shouldn't be in that reality will cause it to implode. The multiverse is extremely fragile and frail, and everyone messing around in it's what's going to cause these realities to fall apart. You can start to see why the exiled Kang was so desperate to stop his variants in Quantumania, because they've got the potential to destroy reality by meddling so much. Though we've never had this confirmed, I think he's likely going to go on to become He Who Remains, and through the TVA they'll stop the offshoot timelines from destroying it all. Now, they might use Strange as the central figure in all of this, as we learn across all realities that he has been dreamwalking. This echoes the comics with Molecule Man being the key to all the incursions, except the MCU's multiverse destruction is a result of the Kangs. Either way though, once the ball gets rolling on the incursions, there's absolutely no way to stop them, as they're constantly knocking Earths into other ones, and so on and so forth. I think we are slowly seeing everything fall into place, which will lead to it all playing out in Secret Wars. And the comics, things culminate with the timelines being streamlined, and we got a main universe with some characters being pulled across from the other realities. This is how Miles got in the 616, and Amy Pascal's announced that a live-action Miles Morales movie is now in the works. With the appearance of some live-action characters in Across the Spiderverse, I'd love to see the Miles from this brought across into the main MCU, and this would be such a cool way to play on the comics and what's come before. Either way, we haven't got long for the multiverse, and I think we'll see these world-ending events happening more and more. Now that concludes the video, and hopefully this rough overview of the storyline has helped you get your heads around what's going on. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything you think will play into the other films, so comment below and let me know. If you want to support the channel for as little as 99 cents a month, then please click the join button below, and as a thank you, get early access to videos every week. We also have our merch store over at zeroedition.com, which sells lots of nerdy inspired t-shirts, hats and more. We just launched a Secret Invasion / Pulp Fiction inspired t-shirt, so if you want to help us out, get some cool merch out of it, head over there and the link's in the description. Now if you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of the ending of Across the Spiderverse, which will be linked on screen right now. Go over everything that happens in the film, explain all the new characters, and yeah, definitely head over there if you're still as hyped as I am. Absolutely love the film, and yeah, can't wait to talk about it more coming the next week. Make sure you subscribe, as we're going to be dropping lots of different videos, and hopefully you see you over them, as I'd love to have you come back. By the way, I've been Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.